On this episode, we jump all over the news about Bangkok's sort of official name change.
So if you're curious about Bangkok's various official, unofficial, and international identities, you'll dig this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 with $5,000 worth of Canadian tire money in my grubby little hand, but was surprised to find that it's only legal tender in Canada.
What is tire money?
Canadian tire money. Canadian Tire is a massive nationwide chain of like home hardware, automobile fix-it stores in Canada, and they have Canadian Tire cash that you can use to read.
Oh, I see.
Like Monopoly money, but for Canadian Tire stores.
I get it now. Just some American ignorance. Sorry.
That's okay.
That.
And everyone has a story about some dumb kid in high school they knew who worked at like his father's Subway shop or something, and someone paid him in Canadian Tire money, and he actually accepted it as real money. Like everyone's got a story like that.
That's great. Well, I am Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 21 years ago, fell in love with repeating myself louder and louder in broken Thai until I realized the problem is not that the Thai person I'm speaking to is hard of hearing. So I never left.
I wonder what the problem is.
Yeah, I had to bring this up because I remember when I was here maybe a month or two, one of my buddies was teasing me in a taxi, and he was going, "Dude, raising your voice is not going to improve your Thai." Like I remember my buddy, and I'm not very proud to say this week I did the same thing.
Nice.
I was like trying to talk to a cab driver, and he didn't understand what I was saying, and I just kept speaking louder.
At least you're consistent.
There's always a chance they're hard of hearing, Greg. You never know.
You never know. You find that one guy, and you could make 20 years of it all worthwhile.
There's going to be the one guy I talk louder, and he gets it. He's like, "Yes, I understand you now."
You get into the back seat like, worth it.
It's so funny. All right, we want to give a big thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a whole bunch of cool stuff, including our ad-free regular show a day early, emails with behind-the-scenes photos of our interviews, access to our Discord server to chat with me, Greg, and other listeners, and various other goodies. But best of all, patrons also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and Bangkok topics. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we chatted about Greg's recent Peter Pan-themed trip to the island of Galkut, and a few final differences I've noticed between Thailand and the U.S. now that I've been back in the kingdom for about 10 days. To become a patron, head to bangkokpodcast.com/support.
I also had to explain the whole Peter Pan thing to my son because he's sort of tangentially aware of who Peter Pan is. He's like, is he the boy who wears green, like green shoes and green pants and green?
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Well, he's never seen the movie and he has never read the book, so I might have to explain it to him. And
cool.
Everything like that, yeah. Hey, before we get into it, everyone, I wanted to announce that we have a brand new website up. And it's actually not that different from our old website, but under the hood, it's very different from our old website. It makes it much easier to manage on our end. But it has most of the same stuff that our old website did. We're still working on it a little bit. So if you want to check it out, that's bangkokpodcast.com. But the one cool thing that it does have that our old website didn't have was that if you go down to the bottom right corner on the website, you'll see a little microphone button, and you can click that to leave a voicemail for us, which will be sent to us. And we'll, depending on how cool it is, and if it's just a stream of obscenities, we probably won't feature it on the show. But if it's a nice voicemail, we'd love to feature it on the show.
Yeah, it's super easy. I tested it. It works. It basically couldn't be easier. So please leave us your thoughts, comments, observations, jokes, whatever.
Yeah. I think you have to click it, and then you have to give like your browser permission to record audio or something, don't you? But
yeah, that's about it. And you got to give your you got to give your email, I think, something like that, right?
Yeah, your email and those things. But yeah, it's a really cool way to send us a voice message. And, I think we want to start tapping into our extensively handsome and internationally minded audience to give some sort of more insights on Thailand topics around the world.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, so if you want, check out the website, bangkokpodcast.com. Brand new website, and it's got a little button there. So leave us a voicemail and tell us what's going on. And we'd like to feature that on the show. Check it out.
For sure.
Right on. All right. Well, on this episode, we are going to tackle a topic that's got a slight current events tinge to it, which we don't usually do, but it's also something that's kind of sort of always being mentioned somewhere, and that is Bangkok's name.
That's right.
Now, if you haven't been following the news lately, there was a bit of hubbub the other day when it was announced that henceforth, Thailand's capital city would officially and formally be known as Krung Thep Mahanakhon, or Krung Thep, which is what the Thais call it, with the name Bangkok still being used as sort of a vestigial name, still used and accepted, but, Robin to Krung Thep's Batman. So unsurprisingly, this caused a lot of chatter online. A lot of people were talking about it. A lot of people were pro-change, anti-change, and then it actually turned out that it wasn't that much of a change anyway. But it is something that is sort of always being talked about because Bangkok itself has such an interesting history with its name. So we thought we'd dive into it. Ed, what's your take on this?
Well, it's funny because my initial reaction was, okay, this is insane. Bangkok is a well-known city around the world. I mean, everyone knows the name Bangkok around the world. And so to change it, even if you're making it more accurate to Krung Thep or Krung Thep Mahanakhon, to me just seemed like an unnecessary thing. And it was unclear why they were doing it like right now. So my first reaction was completely negative. But over the last few days and reading like the kind of debate and discussion about it, I actually think this issue is kind of more complex and more nuanced. That doesn't mean I'm necessarily in favor of officially changing the name, but I think it's a more complicated question. And I just want to point this out. This does fit the pattern that you and I have discussed ad nauseum of the horrible public affairs of the Thai government, where there's just a very well-established pattern that goes something like this. Thai government makes what appears to be an extreme announcement. Yeah. People immediately say, you can't mean X. And then the government says, no, we definitely mean X. So it's like so they reaffirm it. Like, so their first reaction to any criticism is to dig in and be like, no, we definitely mean X. But then 3 days later, they make an announcement, well, we don't really mean X.
Yeah, exactly. It happens a lot.
That's the pattern. It's always like that. They say X, someone says, really? And they go, yes. Yeah. Yes, X.
Yeah. They announce the draft resolution rather than the final resolution is what they do.
Right. And they always end up semi-walking it back or reversing it or watering it down in some way. And it usually leaves confusion. So in this case, the initial announcement was very extreme. They're like, hey, the English name of our capital is now Krung Thep Mahanakhon. So that was the initial announcement. Bangkok is not called Bangkok anymore.
Right.
In English,
I read it and I sent a smart-ass tweet, as is my want. And it just basically said, good luck with that.
Right.
But yeah, you're right. The first announcement was like, FYI, Bangkok no more, Krung Thep Mahanakhon. Yeah,
it's like they were crossing off the name Bangkok, and the capital of Thailand is now Krung Thep Mahanakhon. And so people were like, holy crap, like that's a major thing. Yeah, and then they stuck by it like they always do. They're like, nope, this is what we're doing. And then after 3 days of people like pointing out what a huge change that is and how it will change every map on planet Earth, so essentially like every map that exists of planet Earth everywhere in the world is now inaccurate.
Yeah, right, exactly.
That they've made a subsequent statement, which I think is a little bit unclear, where they say something like, well, it's an alternative, so Bangkok is still acceptable, but the official name is Krung Thep Mahanakhon. So it's a little bit unclear if will future maps have to change? Like will Google Maps now say Krung Thep? It's so I don't even know what the status is now. It's a little bit unclear. So they've backtracked somewhat, but not completely.
Yeah, well, actually, I kind of did a bit of digging around, and the best that I'm able to understand it, basically, the Royal Academy is what, they have the
Right.
final say on all things Thai language. So for the longest time, I'm not sure since when, but for a long, long time, the official name of Bangkok has been Krung Thep Mahanakhon, semicolon, Bangkok. What they did was they said, hey, now the official name of Bangkok is going to be Krung Thep Mahanakhon, parentheses, Bangkok.
So
Right.
that's the actual change. So that's totally different from their first announcement.
Right.
This is a really a good example of how the Thai government works. So it's like they make a statement that sounds incredibly extreme, and then later they're like, no, it's just a punctuation difference.
I don't know, man. I mean, I'm a grammar Nazi and I edit for a living. I think that makes a big difference. I mean, it sort of puts Bangkok on the back foot. It was blown out of proportion, but I think it is a pretty significant change. They're basically saying, like, look, the main official name, the Batman name, is Krung Thep
Right.
Mahanakhon. The Robin name is now Bangkok.
Right. I really think that, like I said before, I think this issue is trickier than it seems, because I think I think there's a lot of different angles. Like, one angle is to just say something like this. If something is in your language, you get to decide what to call it. So, for example, Thai people decide what to call France in Thai. Correct?
Farang said.
So right. So French people do not decide what France is called in Thai. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
Agree,
So
yeah.
Thai people decide what to call France in Thai. So can't native English speakers, don't we get to decide what the capital of Thailand is called in English? I mean, you know what I mean? So it's an English language question. What do we call Thailand, or what do we call Bangkok? So I think that's one take, is that you don't get to dictate another language. Okay?
Yeah, I see.
Okay, except the problem with that is English is really kind of a world language now. So it's not, it wouldn't be fair if just, I mean, it sounds weird to say, but English is not a language like other languages. Like, obviously Thai people get to decide what to call France and Germany in Thai. They do, of course.
Right.
But English is just different now, because it's the closest thing we have to a common language. So it wouldn't be fair if English native speakers just got to name everything in the world, and then because then people would have to use the English word for their own country. So there is another level to this, where
Right.
maybe countries should have the right to decide what their country is called in another language.
Well, that's an interesting element of this too. And again, like you said it perfectly. Like, when I first heard about it, I was like, this is stupid. What a waste of time and paperwork. But the more you started thinking about it and reading about it, there's actually a lot more there. And there's a really interesting thread by Pacha Panamwan on Twitter. Her name is Pacharapon P. And she did a really long thread on this, about the history of the name and things like that. I won't get into all the nitty gritty here, but it's very well done. But there is an element of colonialism involved in this, because, I mean, you think back to the British when they were sailing around the world, blowing shit up with their guns. They did get to decide what they called things, what everyone called things in
Right.
English. They called Mumbai Bombay, they called Kolkata Calcutta, they called Chennai Madras, and there's a lot of other instances where the colonial powers just said, you know what, we have a hard time saying what the locals say, we're just going to change it to what we like to say. So there is
Right.
like sort of this undercurrent of colonialism, and of course Thailand has famously never been colonized, so there's a lot to unpack here, and I think it carries with it a bit more weight than it initially seems to have.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I think this issue is very nuanced, because another problem here is if every country gets to decide what their country or cities are called in English, and they're trying to replicate their own language, well, that's basically impossible, because I don't speak Chinese. And so if the Chinese decide to phonetically create English words to copy their language. It reminds me, this is just a goofy thing from my philosophy class. So the Chinese sage Confucius, in English we say Confucius. Now I can't speak Chinese, but apparently in Chinese, this sage is called Gung Fu Tzu, something like that. Gung Fu Tzu, like Master Gong, something like that. And, some British guy heard a Chinese person say that and was like, Confucius? Like, did you say Confucius?
Oh, I had no idea.
And they just created an approximation of the Chinese. But maybe that's the best you can do. Like, how you can't speak Chinese in English. So you can't expect everyone in the world to use your language to identify your country. Do you understand? Like, we like who knows? Like, how do the Portuguese say Portugal? It's probably nothing like Portugal. I have no idea how it's like. It's in Portuguese, and so you can't ask everyone in the world to speak your local language.
Right. Names are complicated, man. And this sort of leads into a parallel issue that I wanted to talk about. And this is how to pronounce countries. Because I remember a while ago, you and I were talking about something, and I said Laos. And one of our listeners wrote in and he was like, hey, by the way, it's actually pronounced Lao. And I was like, yeah, I know. Like, it goes back and forth. And in the West.
Not in English, though. In English, it's not pronounced Lao. It's pronounced Laos in English.
That's right. And I said it kind of goes back and forth. In the West, we say Laos, so I say it just, to be comfortable with it. But then, so I was actually contacted by someone on Twitter named Tim Boer, who has a blog and a travel company up in Isan. He has a really good website and knows a lot about the area. And he raised something that sort of opened my eyes a little bit. And basically, Laos is the English international term for that country.
Right.
And to expect non-Laotian people to use the Laotian name for their country is a bit silly. Like, we say Germany, we don't say Deutschland. We say Italy, we don't say Italia. We say Sweden, we don't say Sverige or whatever it is.
Right. We don't speak German. We don't speak German. We don't speak Italian. The thing about so that's the counter argument that Krung Thep, that's what Thai people call it, but that doesn't mean that in English you have to approximate that necessarily.
No, it doesn't. But then the playing devil's advocate, the flip side of the coin, don't Thais get to decide what something is called? Like, what happens if Thailand woke up tomorrow morning and said, "Hey, we're going to change the name of Canada to Flannel Land or something"? Canadians would be like, no, it's Canada.
That would be pretty accurate. Flannel Land I would second that. I like that. That's a good name for Canada. It would
be accurate, but don't we get to say in what people call Canada?
Well, the other twist in the Bangkok issue is that Bangkok is not a foreign word. So Bangkok is a Thai word, and Bangkok refers to a district in Thonburi. So I happen to live in Bangkok Noi, and I used to live in Bangkok Yai. And so Bangkok is a Thai word, but it really just refers to part of Thonburi. And I don't know how it came to be used as a name for the whole city, because Thai people definitely do not call Bangkok Bangkok. Like, they call it Krung Thep. They only use Bangkok. They only use Bangkok to talk about Bangkok Noi or Bangkok Yai. That's the only time they use it, unless they're speaking English, of course.
Right. Well, that tweet thread by Kunpacha, she addresses this, and basically, one of her tweets says, "Here's a guide on urban development and capital names. Bangkok isn't part of Krung Thep, or also known as Nakorn province. Tanom Kitakachon merged Nakorn and Thonburi into one city under the name Krung Thep Maha Nakorn in 1972." So why the name Bangkok for the city? There's no concise answer, but 18th and 19th century colonial powers simply had the habit of naming the world according to their views. Thais are also your classic passive-aggressive pacifists who will take offense and never confront. So they just sort of saw that Bangkok was a district of Krung Thep, and then the whole place became Bangkok, and it stuck.
Like somehow, right. I mean, some random foreigner started using Bangkok for the whole city, and it just got accepted. But It's just, like I said, this issue is so tricky because, for example, America is named after some random Italian dude, like Amerigo Vespucci. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it's not that the guy it's not that the guy didn't do anything special, but it's fairly random that this one Italian explorer and I think map maker, like his name becomes the name of America. It wasn't something by vote, or it wasn't like the American people decided we're going to call ourselves America because of Amerigo Vespucci. Like, that's not how it happened. Like, shit just happens. Like, the weird thing about language, it's like language, it's just not planned out. It's like organic.
Right. Well, like Cincinnati is named after Cincinnatus, who was a twice elected Roman dictator.
That's right. And also a farmer, I believe. I think he was like, isn't he the famous guy who was like a commoner who got elected and then he went back to being a farmer?
Well, he got appointed, I guess. He got appointed dictator twice and both times went back to being a cabbage farmer. So he became the ideal man who gave up power twice.
Yeah. So it's like, I guess my whole point with this issue is I really see both sides. So I'm not really taking a side. I think it's obvious that Thai people have the right to just say, they have a right to officially say, our capital in English is called Krung Thep. So, of course, the Thai government or Thai people, they have the right to do that.
Sure.
I mean, obviously, they can't force people to use that word, but if they want to, they can on their maps they could start. So it's I'm really curious if this is gonna end up being literally nothing, like nothing is actually going to change, or if they're going to start putting Krung Thep on their own maps, I'm curious if it reverberates beyond like the Royal Academy.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen. You'll start to see that on official documentation, on government paperwork and government forms and things like that. It's going to be Krung Thep Mahanakhon. But let me ask you this. What do you think the reaction is going to be from people around the world? Like, are people going to see this and just it's going to disappear into a cloud of like, nah, Bangkok it is. It's always going to be Bangkok.
I have a feeling that Bangkok is going to stick, I think, especially because of the way the Thai government has now walked it back. Where they've kind of said, so you made your point about the punctuation, but they've also made a statement where they said something like, oh, well, they're interchangeable. They made a statement, where they're interchangeable. So so now the Thai government is not digging in; they're kind of compromising, which is the Thai way of handling these things.
The middle path, yo.
Yeah, they're essentially saying it's okay to keep using Bangkok. So in that case, clearly, the people are going to keep using Bangkok. So I don't think we have to change the name of the podcast.
Well, that's good because Krung Thep Mahanakhon. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to try and prize you out. I'm going to start. I know a long time ago I promised I would learn how to say this, but I wrote it down. Now, we should have opened the show with this, but for those that don't know, I think most people listening to the show probably do know, but Bangkok is famously one of the longest place names in the world. And I'm going to attempt to say it here. Just indulge me for a second here. So,
Jesus, here we go.
The official name of Bangkok in Thai is Krung Thep Mahanakhon Amon Ratanakosin Mahintara Yutia Mahadilok Pop Noparat Racha Tani Buriram Urom Racha Niwet Mahasatan Amon Pimana Watana Satit Sakatatia Witsanu Kamprasit. How's that?
Wow. Well, I'm not sure we can call the podcast that.
That's not going to fit on the graphic. I don't care what it says.
That's not going to fit on the graphic. No. So whatever. I feel like all we've done is maybe pointed out. All we've done is really complicate the matter. But maybe that's good though. Maybe it is. I think maybe that's what needs to be done here. I think it's a complicated question, but of course, the Thai government has the right, and Thai people have the right to say we want people to use Krung Thep and not Bangkok. Of course, they have the right to say that.
Yeah, but I think ultimately it's just going to be like, whatever one you want, it's fine. But on our government going to use Mahanakhon, Krung Thep Mahanakhon, you can use Bangkok. It's all good, man. Sabai sabai.
So I have to ask you, since you brought it up, are you reasserting your promise to memorize that, or are you just going to read it?
I think I'll just read it.
Or are you surrendering? So you're tapping?
No, I'm not tapping. Give me another few years, and I'll see what happens. Get back to me in season 8. I'll let you know what's going on.
Oh, geez. Okay. Well,
but as a bit of a side note here, it's not only the Thai government that makes sort of like these announcements that blow up in their face. Because I remember years ago, God, it was probably 1995, 1996. I grew up in Calgary, Canada, and there was a move put forward to change the name to Calgary City, as in New York City.
Why?
That was the reaction. People were like, "Get the fuck out of here! What? Why? What are you doing? Who can? This is stupid, right?" And then, it could have crashed and burned and disappeared. I literally can't find any record of that online. I searched, but I distinctly remember it being a big issue back in the day. But I did find a story from 2017, which was pretty recently, and the First Nations people in Canada, which of course were there long before us whiteys came in and started kicking people around. They wanted to change the name of Calgary back to their language in 2017. So they wanted to rename Calgary to Wichispa Oyade.
Oh, wow.
Which is a Stoney Nakota term, roughly translating to Elbow Town, because Calgary sits on the Elbow River.
So that's the Canadian version of like Native American or Native Canadian. You call them First Peoples.
First Nations, yes.
First Nations, okay.
Yeah. So it's not just happening in Thailand, man. I mean, there's a long history of places changing or adjusting or adding something onto their names.
Well, whatever. I can roll with Krung, Thep, Maha, Nakorn. I'm game. I can roll with that.
That's pretty cool. Now, here's the ultimate question. Do you think they'll ever change Thailand back to Siam?
I hope so, man. I mean, I've talked about it before, but I'm a huge believer in the name Siam. I think the name Thailand is a racist name. I've said this before. Thailand is literally like a racist name. So I much prefer Siam, and I much prefer the old elephant flag. So I've said it many times.
Yeah.
Like I would love for Thailand to change its name to Siam and go back to the elephant flag. It's one of the coolest flags ever. But that's just me.
Well, start a petition, man. Don't you have to get like 1 million signatures and like goes to a vote or
just,
something like that?
I have this strange feeling that coming from a foreigner, it won't really carry that much weight. It's like, hey, I'm a foreigner, but please change the name of your entire country to satisfy me.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. You better just keep your mouth shut.
Yeah, I think on this subject, it's better to just stay mum.
Yeah. Also, a quick shout out while we're talking about names to one of my favorite people, Jackie Chan. Chinese, he's called Chan Kong Sang, but in Thailand he's known as Chan Long. So there you go, 3 names for one dude.
Wow.
Names are fluid, man. They're always changing. Back in high school I said I was going to put a silent P in front of my name just to mess people up. But Greg. Anyway,
you just
all right, something to keep an eye on. Man, this place is never boring, is it? All right, let's get into some love, loathe, or live with, where one of us picks a particular aspect of living in Bangkok, which we then discuss and decide if it's something that we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept as something that we just have to learn to live with no matter how we feel about it. The last time I asked Ed what he thought about salty toothpaste. So this week, Ed, it's your turn to quiz me.
All right, dude. So obviously you're very familiar with the Thai dish som tam. And I'm sure, again, I'm mispronouncing it, but this is a classic Thai dish, northeastern dish, famously spicy.
Yeah, love it.
But I want to ask you about this. Some restaurants, Thai restaurants, they have kind of interesting variations on som tam. Like I'm actually a fan of like apple som tam. And there's a whole bunch of different kind of alternative som tam options. So what's your take on that? Are you a traditional som tam guy? Are you a variations guy? Are you a no som tam guy? What's your take?
So when you say variations, like you don't mean like the core ingredient of som tam is papaya. So you're not talking about just
this would be with apple instead of papaya.
Right. So substituting the main part of the som tam dish with something else. No, man, I'm not a fan of that. No, I've had carrot som tam. I've had I think I've had apple som tam too. Yeah, I've had a bunch of different kinds, and to me, it's sort of like the Thai food version of a vegetarian hamburger. I'm like, what
right.
What are you doing? Just have the real thing. It's so good. Like,
for some reason, like the real thing to me. Okay, number one, it's usually too spicy, right? Which is
right.
like you almost don't have to say it. Like it's just usually too spicy. And number two, if you have the real traditional one, of course it has fish sauce, which I don't eat anymore, because I'm vegetarian. Okay. But even when I ate fish, if the fish sauce is subtle, then it's okay. Like if it's just kind of like a tinge of flavor.
Yeah.
But if there's a lot of fish,
same in lab mu for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Like a little fish sauce is okay. So I've always been a fan of the variations, man. I'm for experimenting with somtam.
I guess you can call me a somtam purist then. I like the original thing. Now, to a certain extent, I don't like the Krung, the dried shrimp.
Well, then you can't be a traditionalist, dude. Come on.
Well, I mean, how do you define traditionalist?
But
isn't it my place to label myself a traditionalist rather than have someone put that name upon me?
But can you normally handle the typical level of fish sauce? Like, do you ever tell them like go easy on the fish sauce, or you just roll with whatever they're going to give you?
I just roll with it. Yeah, I roll with it. But usually it's so weird. Like the idea of fish sauce itself is revolting to me. But food, I quite like it, which is doesn't make any sense. But that's what it is.
On the lower levels, it's okay. On the lower levels, it's okay. But do you have to? You must tell them like my pet. You must tell them like not spicy.
Oh yeah. That's just the standard order for me.
Yeah, because when you order not spicy, it's gonna come spicy.
Yeah, my pet for them is like, don't blow my face off, but still make my mouth burn.
Right. All right.
So
all I gotta say is I'm all for the experimentation. I'm a particular fan of apple sometimes. I'm just going to say that. I know like that's not traditional, but I'm a fan.
All right. Well, takes all kinds of freaks.
Okay. A final thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping support the show. Find out more by clicking support on our website and connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, BangkokPodcast.com on the web, or simply BangkokPodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
Oh, yeah, we do. You can also listen to each episode on YouTube. You can send us a voicemail through our website that we'll feature on the show, or even reach out to me directly on Twitter, where I am BKK Greg. So thanks for listening, everyone. We hope to see you in Thailand real soon, and we'll see you back here next week.
No doubt.
I'm feeling a little bit, my throat's a little bit scratchy tonight. Don't know why.
You might have COVID. You might have the virus, the V.
I saw the picture of the opening frame of The Simpsons where the title is coming through the clouds in the sky, but it says The Symptoms. It's like whenever I cough and I can just hear the symptoms.
Oh, that's so funny. That's very funny.
Okay. All right.
Whenever I think of the word virus, it reminds me once when I was in Hua Hin, my first or second year here with like all my friends from work, and we wanted to like party, and we went out to dinner and drank a lot, and they were like, we got to find a club, like a dance club. We want to go to like a Thai dance club, and so we're asking all these Thais, and they pointing around, and we had to drive around the city of Hua Hin, and we get to the club, and the name of the club is Virus. And we were like, this is not a good name for like a social, like it was like a buzzkill. We get to like the club, we're at like a Thai dance club, and it's called Virus. And I'm like, it's kind of a buzzkill. It's kind of demotivating.
Okay, let me go.
Not a good name.